I apologized for the appearance of my daughter-in-law, which my mother-in-law found displeasing. During my father-in-law's 60th birthday celebration, she reprimanded me in front of our relatives, lamenting not just her lack of attractiveness, but also her perceived incompetence. It was truly humiliating. I found myself wondering where my usually supportive husband was during this ordeal. Was he occupied with our daughter? His absence was conspicuous. Upon my arrival at my in-laws' home, feeling ready to enjoy the festivities, my mother-in-law suddenly complained of chronic back pain, rendering her unable to participate. Consequently, she entrusted all party preparations to me. As the event progressed, she continued to denigrate me in front of our gathered relatives, casting a shadow over what should have been a joyous occasion. It felt as though the lively atmosphere had turned somber, resembling more of a funeral than a celebration. Then, breaking the uncomfortable silence, my father-in-law stood up. "Is that all you have to say?" Little did anyone know, this seemingly innocuous question would set off a chain of events beyond imagination. My name is Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. 6 years ago, I tied the knot with Michael, my husband, who happened to be 3 years my junior. Together, we have a delightful 5-year-old daughter. However, despite the joy of our family, there was always a shadow lurking in the form of my mother-in-law's disapproval. She harbored resentment towards me for being older than her son. Every holiday visit, be it New Year's, Memorial Day, or any national celebration, was tainted by her cutting remarks aimed at me, often in the absence of my husband. "I wish I had a younger, livelier, and more attractive daughter-in-law, not someone adorned with age spots like you," she would say with a sharp tongue. "Do I really look that old?" "Yes, very much so. Haven't you noticed your own reflection in the mirror every day?" Receiving criticism about one's appearance can be deeply hurtful, especially for women. Despite this, I tried to brush it off, considering our limited interactions occurring only a few times a year. However, instead of diffusing the situation, my nonchalant response seemed to further provoke her. "You're remarkably thick-skinned for a woman of your age. It's irritating how you remain unaffected by my words. You lack even a trace of humility," she continued, her words growing harsher with each exchange. Yeah," was all I could muster in response. How should I confront my mother-in-law, whose words always leave me speechless? In front of my husband, she wears a facade of kindness, concealing her true nature. It's as if he's oblivious to her mistreatment of me. Yet, if I were to express my frustrations, I fear I'd bear the blame. So, I've endured in silence. Visiting their home with her presence feels like carrying a heavy burden. Despite this, it was a significant occasion, my gentle father-in-law's 60th birthday celebration. With numerous relatives gathering for the grand event, I chose to attend. Though my father-in-law is reserved, his subtle acts of kindness envelop me when my mother-in-law's hurtful words weigh me down. He gently approaches, offering solace with his words. "Sarah, if you're struggling, please don't hesitate to confide in me. I'd like to offer my support if that's all right with you." I couldn't help but wonder if my father-in-law was aware of the harassment I endured from my mother-in-law. Perhaps he chose to refrain from openly supporting me to shield me from further mistreatment behind the scenes. To honor our compassionate father-in-law, our family embarked on a 3-hour journey early in the morning to reach our in-laws' home. Feeling a bit under the weather with a low-grade fever and lingering fatigue, I entrusted the driving to my husband, Michael. Upon arrival, my mother-in-law emerged from the front door with an air of cheerfulness. Well, look who's here. It's been a while, Michael. You should visit more often. Oh dear, you look exhausted." "I've been driving non-stop, so it's understandable," Michael replied wearily. "You've clearly put in a lot of effort. I'll prepare the bed right away. Why don't you go rest in the back room?" "That sounds like a plan, Sarah. You should rest too. You've been tending to our child in the car. You must be exhausted. Plus, you don't seem well." "Oh, Michael, you didn't know. I spoke with Sarah yesterday, and we arranged to go shopping for the 60th birthday celebration." "Sarah, you go rest. Once you've placed the luggage at the entrance, we'll head out." Of course, I couldn't recall any such arrangement, nor did I recall discussing any shopping plans. After looking after our energetic 5-year-old daughter, I felt drained. Since I wasn't feeling well, I welcomed the chance to rest. "Since Sarah isn't feeling well, let her rest. You can handle the shopping, but this is your father's special occasion. I want to pick out the finest ingredients with Sarah." "Sarah, you'll stick to our plan, won't you?" She had a knack for presenting excuses that left me no room for refusal. After dropping off the luggage, she grabbed my arm forcefully and directed me back into the car we had just exited. With an intense glare, she snapped, "You don't need rest right now." But almost instantly, her demeanor softened into a broad smile as she exclaimed, "Thank you for driving this. I really appreciate it." Knowing my mother-in-law's temperament, opposing her at that moment would likely ruin the entire day. With reluctance, I found myself settling into the driver's seat. "I'm feeling all right, Michael. You take a break. I'll accompany mother-in-law for shopping." Attempting to hand her daughter over to Michael, my mother-in-law swiftly intervened, taking the child from my arms and settling her into the child's seat before shutting the door firmly. Taking care of the child is a mother's responsibility. "Well then, Michael, we're off." As she settled into the passenger seat, her previously sweet demeanor vanished, replaced by a harsh tone as she began to chastise me. "So, you can't even manage to care for your own child? Quit relying on Michael for everything. You're nothing but an incompetent daughter-in-law, aging before your time." What was truly unsettling was her ability to maintain a sugary facade while my husband, Michael, remained within earshot, completely oblivious. "Wave goodbye to this microwave," she quipped as we embarked on the drive in my husband's unfamiliar car towards the bustling supermarket. Predictably, my mother-in-law wasted no time before launching into a lecture. "You'll regret lounging around while my son drives, mother-in-law," I retorted weakly. "Please refrain from such ominous remarks. I've been battling fever and fatigue since this morning. Your poor health stems from your lack of discipline, and your crow's feet, more pronounced. Those cheek spots, darker. It's painful to witness. Your skin has lost its former vitality," she criticized relentlessly. Drained of all energy to counter her harsh words, I merely nodded as we reached the supermarket. This is utterly exhausting. How do daughters-in-law worldwide endure such treatment from their mothers-in-law? My spirited mother-in-law sprang out of the car without a word of gratitude, immediately thrusting 2 shopping carts into my hands. "Move faster, you're so slow." Attempting to steer clear of the bustling crowds, I lagged behind, but she surged ahead, filling the carts with extravagant items like USDA prime beef, crab, salmon roe, and melons. She then proceeded to toss in unnecessary items. "Mother-in-law, do we really need all of this right now? I've already decided, we're stocking up so we won't have to make frequent trips. You should have known that without my having to tell you." Feeling utterly helpless, I allowed her to dictate the shopping list. By the time we finished, the carts were overflowing. "Let's head to checkout. Move quickly now, no dawdling." Despite her haste, when it was time to settle the bill at the checkout counter, my mother-in-law made no move to retrieve her wallet. "Mother-in-law, the payment," I ventured. She kept her hands folded behind her back, unmoving. When I pressed her again for the money, she shot me an angry glare. "You should foot the bill for everything." "Excuse me," I stammered. "As a wife, it's your responsibility to cater to your husband's family. Don't be miserly, just pay up." Reluctantly, I ended up covering the entire bill at the register, totaling $300. With no cash on hand, I had to charge it to my credit card. As a part-time worker trying to support my child, this financial blow hit hard. What made matters worse was that I had brought $300 as a birthday gift for my father-in-law's 60th birthday, but now I couldn't use it. This expense meant tightening our belts even further in the future, adding to the already heavy burden. I wonder how I'll break this news to Michael. If I were to speak up about this treatment, my mother-in-law might cause a scene. During the car ride home, she continued her onslaught of insults, showcasing an impressive array of verbal attacks. On our arrival home, my husband remained fast asleep, likely exhausted. Sensing an opportunity, my mother-in-law's smile widened as she began to assert her authority over me. "After you've put away the groceries, go eat in the garden immediately. Could I please have a moment to rest? You have no right to defy your mother-in-law. This is the consequence of letting Michael drive alone. You brought this upon yourself," I muttered. "If you have time to argue, then you have time to work. Hurry up, we're running out of time. After you've eaten, clean the bathroom and the toilet." Despite the injustice of the situation, I had no option but to endure it. Throughout the day, I toiled in the garden, pulling out weeds before tackling the grime and yellow stains in the bathroom and toilet. As I worked, I consoled myself with the thought that once the 60th birthday celebration concluded, I could enjoy some respite from my mother-in-law's presence. Just as I finished cleaning, my husband stirred from his slumber, surprised to find me still at work. Sarah, are you all right? If you're not feeling well, don't push yourself too hard. Take a break, he urged. Thank you, I'll take you up on that, I replied wearily. Ouch, that hurts. But before I could finally rest, my mother-in-law suddenly let out a piercing cry, clutching her back in agony. Despite her earlier vitality, she now complained of sudden back pain, her demeanor shifting from lively to frail in an instant. This is troublesome. My back is in excruciating pain. I can't manage anything. My chronic back issues have flared up once more. I won't be able to prepare food before our relatives arrive. Sarah, you're my only hope. But oh, what am I to do? While her distressed demeanor seemed somewhat contrived, if her chronic back pain was genuine, then standing in the kitchen would indeed be impossible for her. With a heavy heart, I entrusted my husband with our daughter's care and reluctantly began cooking. Sarah, are you certain you're all right? I'm fine. Cooking is my usual responsibility, remember? I maintained a facade of strength for my husband, though my body was already weary. However, it was a significant day for my father-in-law, and I felt compelled to soldier on. My head is spinning, and the scent of food is making me queasy. But I must persevere for my father-in-law's sake. After completing the cooking, my father-in-law entered the kitchen to check on me. You've worked tirelessly. Thank you for preparing all this food. It's my pleasure. It's all for you. Please enjoy it later. As the relatives began to gather, each offering well wishes to my father-in-law, the atmosphere became animated. After the toasts were made and we were on the verge of starting the meal, my mother-in-law uttered something utterly shocking. I regret to inform everyone that due to my chronic back pain acting up on this important birthday celebration, all the food was prepared by my daughter-in-law. I apologize for the lackluster quality of the dishes, courtesy of my unattractive daughter-in-law. Both my father-in-law and husband were stunned into silence by my mother-in-law's sudden outburst. Not only is my daughter-in-law unattractive, but she's also clumsy and utterly inept. It's truly a shame, she continued, her tone dripping with disdain. As she exaggeratedly rubbed her back, my mother-in-law persisted in belittling me. She's quite clumsy, you see. Without my assistance, she's helpless. I even question her ability to care for her own child. I worry whether Michael can cope with such a wife. What should have been a joyous occasion swiftly descended into a somber atmosphere, reminiscent more of a funeral than a celebration. My typically supportive husband, who should have been caring for our daughter, was conspicuously absent. Then, in a moment that shattered the tension, my father-in-law, who had been silently observing, rose to his feet. Is that all you have to say? He demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. Seems like it. Perhaps it's time to bid farewell to the useless one, my mother-in-law added, her words dripping with contempt. In that instant, my husband strode into the room, carrying our daughter in a suitcase. His expression was unusually stern. Dad, as you suggested, I've packed her belongings, he declared firmly. My mother-in-law's smile hinted at satisfaction. Sarah, it appears you're being shown the door, she taunted. But to her astonishment, my husband handed the suitcase to her. What? My father-in-law's booming voice delivered the final blow. Take that and leave this house immediately. Despite her initial confusion, my mother-in-law swiftly grasped the gravity of the situation. Why am I the one being asked to leave? It's Sarah who's incompetent. The bathroom is always covered in mold, the toilet left filthy, and you dare to label Sarah as useless when you hardly lift a finger to cook. And let's not forget how terribly you've treated her. I've had my fill. It's a mother-in-law's responsibility to guide her daughter-in-law. I was merely pointing out her flaws. Guidance. Please. Do you think we're living in? My father-in-law began, but the raised eyebrows of an enraged father-in-law left no room for support. Realizing she wouldn't garner any sympathy from him, my mother-in-law resorted to her usual theatrics, turning to my husband and bursting into tears. Michael, don't get the wrong idea. Someday, we might have to take care of your father, right? So, I was trying to teach Sarah how to be a good wife, as difficult as that may have been. Taking care of him, that's a joke. I won't be fooled by you anymore. You've been mistreating Sarah all along, even today. Despite feeling unwell, she still came to celebrate Dad's 60th birthday. Sarah volunteered to join the celebration, didn't she? Don't deny it. And you made her foot the bill for the groceries, didn't you? I found a receipt from today in her bag when she was trying to get candies for our daughter. It clearly shows Sarah paid with her credit card. I just asked her to pay because I didn't have any cash on me. I was planning to reimburse her later, honestly. Really? If I hadn't noticed, you would have stayed silent about it. I've ignored the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts, but you've crossed a line. I'm tired of living with such a spiteful old woman. Witnessing my husband and father-in-law turn away from her, my mother-in-law reverted to her usual theatrics, blaming me with all her usual dramatic flair, tears streaming down her face. No, I haven't vocalized it, but it's undeniable that you've been mistreating me, isn't it? For the sake of my father-in-law and my husband, who had shown me unwavering support, I summoned the courage to speak the truth for the first time. I refused to let my mother-in-law continue to dictate the narrative. That's correct. We were informed by Mia. We're aware of the derogatory remarks you made about Sarah at the supermarket and in the car afterward. You forced Sarah to handle all the weeding and cleaning in the house. Yeah, Grandma was mean to Mommy. She made her clean lots of things. You can't just dismiss a child's words. Maya doesn't lie. Let's review the dash cam footage. That should clarify everything. Excellent suggestion, Sarah. I'll do that right away. Ignoring his mother's protests, Michael strode out to the parked car, starting the engine and pulling up the dash cam footage. The latest model, equipped to record both the road and the car's interior, provided crystal clear visuals, including facial expressions. It's all there. She said those things. I murmured. I'm appalled, echoed everyone as they watched the footage unfold. This is utterly unacceptable. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had remained inside the house, adamantly denying any wrongdoing, began to panic as tension thickened, rushing barefoot toward the car. Stop this immediately. Don't watch. But no amount of shouting could halt the revelation. With all her transgressions laid bare, my mother-in-law stood speechless, stunned into silence. That's when my father-in-law casually handed her a single piece of paper. I've filled out my portion. You just need to complete yours and submit it. What? Is this a divorce form? I had to prepare it just in case. I never imagined I'd have to use it. Never darken my doorstep again. Wait, I promise to change. Promises won't suffice, Sarah. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. Seeing my mother-in-law plead for forgiveness, tears streaming down her face, was a pitiful sight. But I suspected it might be yet another performance. With resolve, I gently pushed her away. You've revealed your mistreatment of your daughter-in-law. I can never forgive you. It's best you leave before the neighbors become involved. Oh no, this is dreadful. The commotion caught the attention of neighbors who observed from a distance. Perhaps unwilling to create a scene, she swiftly accepted the divorce papers and her suitcase, miraculously recovered from her supposed back pain, and dashed out of the garden. With the villain swiftly dealt with, our once tense home was now heavy with remorse. I apologize for all this disruption during your 60th birthday celebration, Dad, I said sincerely, bracing for his response. Sarah, you bear no blame. I'm the one who should apologize for all the trouble we've caused. Let's put this behind us and start anew, he replied. A smile graced my father-in-law's face. The relatives, too, looked on with sympathetic expressions. Later, they commended the dishes I had prepared and enjoyed them with gusto. In that moment, all weariness seemed to evaporate into thin air. Thus, we commemorated my father-in-law's 60th birthday in grand style. Despite her initial reluctance, my mother-in-law eventually agreed to the divorce, and it concluded amicably. It also came to light that she had been embezzling funds from my father-in-law's account, resulting in an order for her to repay $10,000 that she had spent recklessly. Struggling to secure employment due to her lack of experience, she now works as a nighttime janitor in an office building. With little money remaining, she resides in a dilapidated apartment that has seen better days. Meanwhile, I discovered that I was pregnant with my second child. The discomfort I had experienced earlier was attributed to my pregnancy. 5 months have elapsed since then, and my husband Michael has been incredibly supportive. Our ultrasound revealed that we are expecting a baby boy. Both Michael and my father-in-law eagerly anticipate his arrival, already preparing for his welcome. My father-in-law even sent over a selection of blue baby clothes. Our darling daughter is thrilled at the prospect of having a younger brother and diligently practices caring for a baby with her dolls each day. Witnessing her enthusiasm fills me with boundless joy. I'm driving the car home, so you'll have to walk from the airport. You're always busy with chores and glued to the computer, so you probably need some exercise, huh? It'll take you around 3 hours to get back, so just hang in there. Kyle's words had a harsh edge to them. Once he jumped in the car, he ordered me out, his smirk dripping with contempt, like a kid playing a prank. Kyle was clearly enjoying himself. Faced with his sarcasm, I managed a weak smile and retorted, "It won't take 3 hours, will it? You're sending me back home, right? What's with the drama? Who said anything about 3 hours? It's just a 9-minute walk to my new place." Kyle laughed heartily, clearly not buying my story. His laughter filled the car, mocking me, yet also revealing his doubt. There were all sorts of people around us. Businessmen in suits, families, elderly couples, young women, each with their own agenda. But Kyle, lost in his laughter, paid them no mind. It was like he was in his own world inside the car, oblivious to the hustle and bustle outside. He kept laughing, seemingly joyful but with a hint of darkness. Alice stopped trying to make me laugh. Do you really expect me to believe such an obvious lie? Quit the nonsense and start walking. It'll be dark soon if you don't hurry. Well, if you're so sure, why don't you come and see for yourself? It might wipe that smile off your face. But honestly, whether you believe me or not, it doesn't bother me at all. Fine. If you're that confident, prove it. But remember, there'll be consequences if you're lying, I challenged. Kyle's irritation was evident as his face twisted in annoyance, his brows furrowing. Kyle's irritation boiled over, his voice booming in the car, drawing surprised looks from those around us. Instead of feeling intimidated, I nearly burst into laughter, knowing Kyle was about to face his own nightmare. With renewed determination, I set off towards my new home. 9 minutes later, Kyle and I stood before an ordinary 12-story apartment building, 3 years old, with a view of departing planes. Kyle seemed taken aback by the building, but quickly masked his surprise with nonchalance. Alice, just admit it. You're lying about moving, aren't you? Stop before you get in trouble for trespassing. Stop fussing and come inside, I replied, though Kyle remained skeptical, following me with a dismissive grunt. Yet, as we rode the elevator to the 5th floor, I sensed unease in his eyes and tension around his mouth. His profile hinted at hidden concerns. Upon reaching the 5th floor and unlocking the apartment door, Kyle's facade crumbled. Anxiety gripped him, and he struggled to maintain confidence, which only made his fear more apparent. As the door swung open, Kyle began to tremble uncontrollably, his face a mixture of shock and fear. I couldn't contain my satisfaction seeing Kyle's reaction. It seemed like he was finally facing reality. "Why are my parents here?" Kyle exclaimed as we faced my angry in-laws. Their red faces hinted at the seriousness of the situation. "You were supposed to be on a trip today. Why are you here, Kyle?" "We set up a fake plan to catch you. We're siding with Alice." Despite their explanation, Kyle looked utterly bewildered. Why go to all this trouble? Why punish me like this? Kyle must have been flooded with questions. Sitting cautiously in front of his parents, he sought clarification, but confusion still clouded his expression. "Can someone explain clearly? I don't understand this ambush and punishment." "Stop lying, Kyle. We saw everything. How you left Alice at the airport to walk home." My father-in-law interjected, showing Kyle his smartphone screen. Kyle's eyes widened, sweat beading on his forehead within seconds. The screen showed our exchange at the airport, capturing the moment vividly. Kyle's mocking and loud voice echoed through the video. His expression shifted drastically as he watched, mouth tight, eyes avoiding the screen, realization dawning. Kyle trembled visibly, sweat glistening on his skin. My father-in-law quietly pocketed his phone, his gaze heavy with anger and disappointment. Tension filled the room. "I can't believe Dad recorded this. When did you even film it?" Kyle stammered, his voice strained. "It was at the airport earlier. We'd been watching all along while you were in the car." My father-in-law replied calmly. At the airport, amidst the bustling crowd, Kyle's parents and I had strategically placed ourselves to witness the events firsthand. Kyle had walked straight into my trap, unaware. His parents observed him silently, the room heavy with anticipation. Finally, my mother-in-law broke the silence. "Kyle, we're shocked." How could you leave your spouse stranded at the airport like that? It was just a heated argument. I didn't mean any harm. Kyle mumbled, his voice trailing off. It's true, abandoning the woman you love isn't right. Kyle, why are you laughing? Is this a joke? Kyle's father interrupted, his mother's glare intensifying. In that moment, Kyle froze, his face draining of color, like a deer caught in headlights. The room filled with a heavy, tense silence. Sensing the disappointment more than anger in his parents' expressions, I realized they held high expectations for Kyle. He had always been responsible and dedicated, facing challenges head-on. Everyone admired his character and expected great things from him. Yet beneath that facade was the reality of how he treated me, his wife. The revelation that their beloved son had mistreated his spouse was difficult for them to comprehend. Feeling their emotions, I knew it was time to reveal the truth to Kyle. Despite his father's stern gaze and his mother's subdued anger, I began to speak. Kyle, I've been struggling for a while now. Just 6 months into our marriage, you changed. You were always away on business trips, neglecting us. Then the bullying started, and I couldn't understand why until I discovered the truth. You've been having an affair. I've told your parents not only about the bullying but also about the affair. At the mention of the affair, Kyle's shocked silence shattered, his gaze piercing through me, almost causing me to falter. But Kyle's parents stepped in. Hold on, Kyle. I'll admit to the bullying. I may have gone too far at times. I didn't realize it then, but if it hurt you, Alice, I'm sorry. However, I haven't cheated. You should have evidence before making such serious accusations. I don't have evidence right now, but it's clear you're cheating, just like your father said. Denying it won't make it go away. Wouldn't it be better to come clean now and prevent more pain? What? Accusing me without proof? You're going to confuse my parents? Kyle protested, his usual defensive pattern emerging when his position was challenged. As the tension rose, the rest of us remained calm. I'll say it again. Denying it won't help, because I already know everything. I may not have proof now, but there's a witness. I'll call her here. Just wait. After the call, the intercom buzzed, and within 3 minutes, as the person entered, Kyle froze as if time had stopped. She's the witness. Her name is Karen. But Kyle, you probably recognize her, right? She's your affair partner. Karen has seen your true colors. She was at the airport with your parents. Wait, Karen? Why is she here? I didn't know about this, Kyle exclaimed. Through my investigation, I had discovered Kyle's affair with Karen, an employee from a client company. I had secretly contacted Karen, and our conversation revealed that Kyle had kept his marital status hidden from her during their relationship. Karen believed they were serious, and she was deeply shocked to learn of Kyle's deception. Naturally, Karen couldn't stomach Kyle's lies, so I arranged for her to be at the airport to confront him. When Kyle caught sight of my new apartment, a subtle grimace crossed his face, not because of its location, but because Karen lived in the same building. Kyle probably never imagined I'd be in touch with Karen, which explained his feeble attempt to appear confident. However, his facade crumbled under scrutiny. In fact, my move to this apartment was calculated to bring me closer to Karen. Kyle, even my picking you up from the airport today was part of the plan to expose your true self. While I may not have physical evidence, Karen herself has confessed to the affair, I informed Kyle, a mixture of scorn and disdain coloring my words as I revealed the truth to my unsuspecting husband who had underestimated me. Kyle ended up revealing his true colors all on his own. He probably thought I was just a stay-at-home wife with a computer hobby, assuming his affair would never come to light. It's almost pathetic, really, how I didn't see through it until after we were married, blinded by the idea of a perfect marriage. But now, the truth is crystal clear. Kyle has done something unforgivable. He deceived me, his parents, and Karen, and even when confronted, he tried to deny it all. All Kyle can do now is own up to his mistakes and apologize as soon as possible. There's no way out of this. Denying it will only make things worse for him. Alice, don't you think you're going too far? Surveillance at the airport, an ambush at our new home, and moving into the same building as Karen all over an affair seems extreme, Kyle protested. You don't understand, Kyle. While you might see it as just an affair, your actions have warranted this extreme response. You cheated with Karen, bullied me, and made life unbearable. all while hiding your true self from your own parents. It's time for you to face the reality of what you've done, I said firmly, meeting Kyle's gaze with unwavering clarity. His parents and Karen, echoing my sentiments, fixed stern looks on Kyle. My plan unfolded exactly as intended, catching Kyle off guard and leaving him with no excuses. Slowly, he began to apologize. I'm so sorry. Karen was so beautiful and young, I couldn't resist lying to win her over. Everything Alice said about the bullying and wanting a divorce is true. I wanted Alice to be the one to initiate it, Kyle admitted, but before he could finish, my father-in-law erupted in rage. Without warning, he hoisted Kyle into the air, Kyle's legs flailing as he struggled. When was the last time you actually talked to Alice, Kyle? She wanted to support you in every way, even starting her work from home for your sake, and yet you, Kyle, was dropped abruptly, coughing and turning his gaze towards me. Since Kyle changed, there had been no meaningful conversation between us. He had stopped listening to anything I said. Even when I talked about my work from home, he dismissed it as just a housewife's hobby. You've not only lied to Alice, Kyle, but also to Karen, deceiving and potentially ruining the life of a young woman, my father-in-law added sternly. What a foolish thing to do, my mother-in-law said, her voice trembling as if she might burst into tears. And then there was Kyle, trembling himself, seemingly coming to a realization. His repeated apologies of "I'm so sorry" made it feel like we were dealing with a completely different person, showing genuine remorse. Though still angry, the in-laws appeared slightly relieved that Kyle was sincerely apologizing. Alice, it's all my fault. I know it's unforgivable, but I'm asking for a fresh start from today. Can we try again? Kyle apologized to me, his words silencing the room. However, my next actions shocked everyone. Kyle, you're such a joke to your father, mother, and Karen. Isn't Kyle just ridiculous? My laughter filled the room, even louder than Kyle's at the airport, leaving everyone puzzled. It may have seemed bizarre, but knowing everything, I couldn't help but laugh. As my laughter subsided, I pulled out a thick envelope from my bag and tossed it at Kyle. What's this? Kyle hastily grabbed the envelope, sensing something ominous. With a nervous swallow, he cautiously checked its contents. The moment he did, he trembled so violently it seemed the room itself shook. That's the result of a separate investigation into your affairs, Kyle. Besides Karen, you were seeing other women during your travels, I revealed. So essentially, these are your local wives across different regions, my father-in-law questioned incredulously. Local wives? Kyle, were you planning to deceive us even further? Kyle's supposedly sincere apology was just a facade to prevent yet another affair from being exposed. His promises of change were nothing but lies. Perhaps he believed if he could just get through this moment, everything else would somehow sort itself out. If so, he was truly foolish. Kyle, all you can do now is get a divorce and pay alimony. I never want to see your face again, so let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Don't try to fool me. You claimed there was no evidence, yet you deceived me. Who deceived whom first? Do you finally understand how it feels to be deceived? Gan it, Alice. You'll regret this, you know. A mere housewife like you won't survive on your own. Don't you dare come crawling back to me. Kyle abandoned his facade and approached menacingly, but his threats seemed laughable to me. It would be Kyle who would regret his actions, yet he left our new home with those final words, oblivious to what lay ahead. The tension in the room dissipated, and we all took a seat simultaneously. My in-laws and Karen offered heartfelt apologies. Alice, we're so sorry for everything. It's our fault for not realizing sooner and causing you such distress. And Karen, we've troubled you deeply. We'll make sure Kyle takes responsibility. Just wait. We'll pursue him relentlessly if necessary. Please, everyone, no need for apologies. Thank you for supporting my plan. Kyle deserves to face the consequences, but there's no need for an extensive pursuit. He'll definitely reach out to us, without a doubt. My in-laws and Karen glanced at me with a slight smile, puzzled by my confidence. They hadn't fully grasped my plan yet, but it wasn't because of overconfidence or denial. It was a certainty I held deep within. I'll say it again. Kyle knows nothing, and I know everything. I could see the path Kyle was heading down clearly. My intention was to watch silently until he faced the consequences of his actions. A month had passed since then. I sat at my computer in our new home, the gentle breeze outside rustling the trees. The serene silence was interrupted by my phone vibrating. The 100th missed call, all from my ex-husband. Taking a deep breath, I answered. As I held the smartphone to my ear, I could hear my ex-husband's voice, a mix of surprise, anxiety, and a glimmer of hope. Finally, you pick up. Why are you ignoring me when I'm in such trouble? Oh, you're in trouble, huh? What happened? I was deceived. One of these local wives turned out to be a scam artist. She took all my money, and now I'm being chased by some scary guys. It's really bad. That sounds tough. Good luck with that. Hey, don't hang up, please. I'm begging you. Just a little help. I've got no money, can't go home. I'm done for without you. Who said, don't come to me with regrets, never come crying back? I knew everything, including the fact you were being deceived, but I chose not to say anything. I thought it was pointless to tell you anything he wouldn't understand without experiencing the consequences firsthand. His voice faded from the call. Perhaps now, Kyle regretted his actions, but I refused to assist him. People like him couldn't grasp others' pain without facing it themselves. You only think of yourself. That's why you're in this situation. I have work to do, so don't call me again. What work? It's just your hobby. I didn't want to have to say this, but my annual income surpasses yours, Kyle. I found success as a web novelist along with my blog, YouTube channel, and more. I can manage just fine on my own. What? You earn more than me. Wait, can you lend me a little money then? My ex-husband rambled, but I hung up and promptly blocked his number. His selfishness left me sighing deeply until the end. Later, I learned from my in-laws about his situation. Realizing he couldn't rely on me, he turned to them for help. However, they were already aware of his predicament and were furious once again. Despite their anger, he continued making excuses, resulting in his parents disarming him. With nowhere to turn, he fled, changing jobs and relocating. However, it seemed a threatening man pursued him to his new location. He even sought refuge near his parents' home at one point, sending messages of regret and reflection. But it was too late. His actions had consequences, and he bore the weight of that truth.
Please, let's not cancel our wedding. I know I acted a bit immature, but when I saw his face, I felt bad. It seemed like my boyfriend's dad was judging me, and my boyfriend didn't stand up for me. I was really fed up with both of them, judging me just by what I wear or own. At our first meeting, they made me feel unwelcome, and at the second, they looked down on me for not being rich. But when they saw the brand of my coat, suddenly they treated me differently. My name's Jessica Smith, and I'm 28 years old. I work at an airport, and my folks have a fashion business back in Italy. Despite that, I live solo in New York City. That's where I met Jacob Turner, my current boyfriend, at my favorite cafe. He's a couple of years older than me and a regular at the same spot. As we started seeing more of each other, he treated me well, and I quickly fell for him. After 2 years together, he proposed we visit his folks for a marriage meeting. I was overjoyed. It felt like he was on the same page about marriage. His dad, like mine, runs a big fashion brand, and I admired how globally active he was. Jacob, just like his dad, dressed in branded clothes. When he mentioned his dad wasn't keen on folks who seemed poor, I reassured him with a smile, saying I was okay with it. I'm not saying you're lacking in money or anything, but it's more about how you present yourself, he said. I don't think he meant any harm, but his words felt like he was talking down to me. Are you implying there's something wrong with how I dress? I asked. No, I think your individual style is great, he replied. How dare you? I make sure to dress nicely to be worthy of being with Jacob. Ever since I started dating Jacob, I've been paying more attention to my fashion, even on my days off. I always wear makeup now, and I've started to take a keen interest in my outfits, from affordable brands to luxury labels. Jacob's presence always shines brightly, and I feel like I pale in comparison next to him. His best feature is undoubtedly his looks, with his model-like physique and face, and the confident aura he exudes. He could easily be in a fashion magazine. As for work, I earn a higher income and speak multiple languages. In terms of skills and abilities, I might have the upper hand. However, his facial features are so striking that I couldn't help but be drawn to him effortlessly. But his occasional condescending comments bothered me, I admitted. Well, Jessica, you're beautiful, so I think you'll be okay. But just know, my dad is strict, Jacob warned. Strict in what way? I inquired. In determining whether you fit the brand image of my dad's company and if you're suitable for the Turner family, he explained. So basically, my dad is extremely proud of his brand, and he won't forgive anyone who tarnishes it. I might not be able to support you on the day, he added with a smile, which only increased my pressure. What do you mean you won't help me? I felt like he was ready to abandon me without a second thought. As the day of the marriage meeting approached, I couldn't shake off my growing unease. Their future in-laws' house turned out to be a luxurious high-rise apartment. Which floor do they live on? I asked. The top floor, he replied casually. But to me, it was shocking enough to make me lose my balance. It wasn't surprising, though. Later, I found out it was a super luxury apartment with a monthly rent of $7,000. The apartment boasted 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a well-equipped kitchen. It was conveniently located just a 2-minute walk from the station, although the rent was steep. Feeling uneasy, I couldn't help but wonder aloud, I hope everything will be all right. To my surprise, he responded with a somewhat tense expression, I'm not sure. It seemed like his father's approval mattered more to him than his own girlfriend's feelings. Clinging to a sense of unease, I stepped into the elevator with him. Upon arriving at his place, we were greeted by his mother. From her demeanor and the luxurious attire she wore, it was evident that the Turners were a well-to-do family. My parents also run a business, so I recognized right away that everything she was wearing was high-end. I thought to myself, despite her welcome, her tone was chilly, as if she had little interest in me. I was ushered into the living room, where his father awaited us. Jacob, is this the woman you wish to marry? He asked. Yes, this is Jessica. She's 2 years younger than me and works as ground crew at the airport, Jacob replied. As he finished the introduction, I nodded politely. Just as I was about to introduce myself, his father posed a question that left me puzzled. Jessica, how much did your entire outfit cost? I hesitated before answering. The coat is from the Gap, and the skirt is from Zara, so altogether, it's probably around $300. Upon hearing my response, his father let out a heavy sigh and proceeded to scold Jacob. Jacob, you've brought this poorly dressed woman here. Are you trying to bring shame to our family name? I was taken aback. Not only had his father insulted me by calling me poorly dressed, but Jacob, instead of defending me, was apologizing profusely. That's when I knew I couldn't go through with marrying him. That's enough. We're done here, declared his father, dismissing me completely. I'm the CEO of a luxury brand. I can't tolerate a woman with such cheap taste. Jacob stood there, stunned into silence. Our engagement was off, and we made our way home, walking silently side by side. Jacob began to complain. Didn't I tell you not to dress how you like? Because of you, I was humiliated in front of my parents. What? Why can't I choose my own clothes? Are you going to force me to wear only your dad's brand after we're married? I snapped back, angered by his lack of support and his father's attitude. Jacob's emotions started to bubble up too. Yes, exactly. If you wear his clothes, you'll impress everyone. Please, just listen to me for once. Your behavior is putting our marriage at risk, he pleaded. Then let's call off the wedding, I retorted sharply. Jacob stopped in his tracks, shocked by my firmness. With a tense expression, he stuttered, You're kidding, right? I responded firmly, I'm serious. Suddenly, all of his confidence vanished, and he began apologizing repeatedly, begging, please, anything but calling off the wedding. Seeing him plead like that made me wonder if I had been too harsh. So, for now, I decided to wait and watch. We agreed to revisit the marriage meeting in a week, but his father threatened to call off the engagement if things didn't go well. I found myself thinking along the same lines as Jacob. Hey, what about wearing this outfit for the meeting with my parents? I suggested, noticing how affected Jacob was after the first meeting. His biggest worry seemed to be not upsetting his father. It was clear that his father's approval meant more to him than our upcoming marriage. That's why he confidently proposed wearing the same brand of clothing as his father. "I'll decide what to wear. If you're going to interfere, let's end things right here," I told him firmly, feeling my desire to marry him slowly fading. As a last resort, I decided to reach out to my dad. I spilled everything that had happened to him. Fast forward to the day of the second meeting. Jacob seemed anxious from the morning, while I remained calm. However, there was one noticeable difference: my outfit. All the clothes I wore were from Italy, something I had requested from my dad. He oversees a brand overseas, which is also sold in the US. Sensing the tension, my dad arranged for clothes to be delivered from his American branch. Since Jacob was at work when they arrived, he was unaware of the switch. When he noticed my new coat, he looked puzzled but didn't comment due to our tight schedule before the meeting. On the way to his parents' house, he pleaded with me, "Let's just make this meeting a success, okay? You do want to marry me, right?" His expression suggested that I should feel privileged to marry him, but deep down, I wasn't as excited about getting married anymore. The growing distrust between us weighed heavily on my mind as we arrived at his parents' house. Despite my inner turmoil, I plastered on a fake smile and assured him I'll do my best. This time, it was his father who greeted us, with my mother-in-law nowhere in sight. Without wasting any time, my father-in-law launched into criticism. "Jacob, what's the meaning of this? Didn't you promise to dress her in our brand?" His pride in the family brand surpassed my expectations. He once mentioned that even a pair of socks from their brand cost over $200. "I'm sorry, Dad." Jessica insisted on choosing her own outfit. Jacob apologized. My father-in-law let out a sigh and turned his attention to me. "Jessica, could you please refrain from tarnishing our family's brand image?" "That coat looks rather cheap," he remarked, scrutinizing my new coat closely. "It seems like a knockoff, doesn't it? It resembles Louis Vuitton at first glance, but it's not genuine." He took out his phone and began searching for something, likely checking the price. "Here it is. There's a knockoff that looks identical to your coat, and it's inexpensive. Even if you choose not to wear our brand, surely there are better options than that." My father-in-law proceeded to ruthlessly critique my appearance. His behavior was utterly unacceptable, signaling that this meeting was no longer just a formality for our impending marriage. Despite the tension, Jacob remained silent in front of his father, failing to defend me. "Well, take a seat and remove that $60 coat. You look destitute," he sneered. Unbeknownst to him, there was a coat similar to mine priced at $60, albeit missing a few zeros. At this point, I had reached my limit. "Excuse me, may I borrow a hanger?" I reached out for one nearby, but my father-in-law scoffed. "For a cheap coat like that, a hanger is too generous. There's a basket over there, use that. Jacob, fetch it for her." He commanded Jacob to hand me a laundry basket, reducing him to nothing more than a puppet under his father's control. Despite our exchanged glances, Jacob remained silent. However, his demeanor shifted when he glimpsed the label on my coat, which I reluctantly placed in the basket. "Dad, this coat is Prada," he exclaimed in disbelief. Both of them were stunned. My future father-in-law, who had previously dismissed my coat as cheap, suddenly changed his tune upon seeing the tag. "Oh, Jessica, why didn't you mention it earlier? You're wearing something truly remarkable," he remarked, attempting to force a smile. I returned his gaze with a cold stare and then addressed the matter of our marriage. "Let's call it off, please." They were taken aback. "What do you mean, Jessica?" "It's only fair. Even if he's your own father, if you can't defend your future wife when she's being belittled, I can't accept you as my husband." When I turned to Jacob for a response, he looked down, unable to utter a word. "Furthermore, father-in-law, this coat is from a brand owned by my father. And when I mentioned Prada, it's a collaborative piece with Prada, overseen by my father. There are only 5 of these in the world, valued at $60,000. $60,000. Father-in-law reacted as if struck by lightning. Later, I learned that the most expensive coat from his brand cost around $12,000. Although $12,000 might seem high-end to most people, it pales in comparison to mine. So it appears big brand CEOs judge people solely based on their appearance, huh? My father-in-law was speechless. Turning to both of them, I continued, "And Jacob, did you really think being the son of a CEO made you invincible? Sure, you dress well and look good, but your character doesn't measure up." "What? What are you saying?" Jacob attempted to retort, but to me, his defensiveness seemed absurd. "Can you even understand where I'm coming from? You left me to endure all the criticism alone and even pressured me to succeed the second time around. How would you feel if our positions were reversed?" "Well, I don't want to endure any more pain just to save face," I rebuked him sternly. His demeanor softened, and he simply said, "I'm sorry." Then, addressing my father-in-law, Jacob added, "Of course, I approve of the marriage. I was wrong. Please, let's calm down." Despite his attempt to regain control, I was thoroughly repulsed by his behavior, still under the mistaken belief that he held the upper hand. Letting out a deep sigh, I startled my father-in-law, who looked at me anxiously. "Are you familiar with the ultra-luxury Italian brand Ruby?" "Ah, yes, they're a renowned global brand." "I know the CEO," my father-in-law responded. "Well, my coat is from Ruby. It's a collaboration with Prada." "I see. But the issue isn't. Actually, I'm the CEO's daughter," I interrupted. "What? You're kidding." Both of them stared at me in disbelief, their mouths opening and closing without uttering a word. It was clear they were struggling to process the revelation. I intended to formally disclose this when we announced our engagement, but given the circumstances, it didn't seem appropriate. So, it appears I've been disrespecting the daughter of a more prestigious brand all this time. So, Dad, Jacob, enough with the charade. How did you not know this sooner? Because of you, we've made fools of ourselves. My father-in-law began to blame his son, feeling cornered. While it may have appeared as though he was merely deflecting blame, it evidently struck a nerve for both of them. I had no idea, all right? All I knew was that she worked as ground staff, my boyfriend admitted, his voice trembling with fear of his father. He seemed genuinely terrified. Suddenly, my father-in-law's demeanor towards me shifted. "Ah, I apologize for my son's behavior. Let me prepare some tea for you," he said, forcing a smile that I found insincere. "Do you always judge people based on superficial factors and change your attitude once you learn about their status? Can't you evaluate people beyond their appearances?" I confronted him, my tone firm as I had resigned myself to the fact that our marriage was no longer an option. When I informed my father about the situation, he mentioned that he's contemplating acquiring your company. "What? He's planning to buy my company?" "Yes, he believes that someone who judges others solely by their fashion brand isn't fit to lead a major company. Fashion brands shouldn't be used to flaunt status. Therefore, the wearer," my father-in-law began to sweat visibly, starting to grasp the seriousness of the situation. "While he may flaunt his status as the president of a major brand now, being acquired would be a different story. Dad, if we're acquired now, we're in trouble, right? We don't have the resources to resist, do we?" Jacob asked his father, his disappointment evident in his voice. It seemed he had some understanding of the company's financial situation. I later discovered that my father-in-law's company was barely scraping by, always teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Any significant setback could easily push them into the red, and it seemed that setback had arrived in the form of a potential acquisition. My father always follows through on his promises, and he raised me to do the same. So, as I mentioned before, there will be no wedding. "Jessica, I'm so sorry," Jacob said, tears welling up in his eyes. I barely spared him a glance. It was hard to reconcile the once cool image of him with the pathetic sight before me. And then there was my father-in-law. "Jessica, I beg you, please reconsider the acquisition," he pleaded. While I didn't hold the final decision, it was surreal to see my father-in-law groveling to me, the same person he had looked down on just moments earlier. His misplaced pride disgusted me, and I simply replied, "That's for my father to decide." With all hope seemingly lost, my father-in-law paled and sank to his knees. Ignoring the two despairing men, I left my father-in-law's house. Following that day, I lost touch with Jacob. When I briefed my father, he disclosed that the acquisition process was already in motion. My father, typically gentle and fair-minded, underwent a transformation upon learning of my distress. He had long eyed the opportunity to acquire my ex-father-in-law's company, buying his time for the right moment. However, upon discovering that the same man who had belittled me for my background was the CEO of the target company, my father's resolve solidified. All uncertainty evaporated. He remarked, "In this acquisition, my priority is to safeguard the well-being of all employees except the CEO." This meant that my ex-father-in-law's fate rested entirely in my father's hands. As for the subsequent fates of those two individuals, I remained uninformed. However, a sense of relief washed over me when I stumbled upon breaking news on TV. The report announced the acquisition of a prominent fashion brand by Ruby Corp, a major American entity. The footage featured my ex-father-in-law during the acquisition. Looking utterly defeated, the fire extinguished from his eyes. My ex-father-in-law and ex-boyfriend, who both prioritized social status in marriage, appeared incapable of recognizing the intrinsic worth of individuals. I firmly believe that CEOs should emulate my father, who assesses individuals based on their character rather than superficial traits. This experience imparted a profound lesson, applicable not only to branded items but to all facets of life.